Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and I'm asked all the time if people should be running beta software, if it will damage the phone, affect battery health, and more. So I wanted to try and answer some of those questions based off my experience. Everyone loves to see something new from time to time, with iOS 18 expected to be one of the largest updates ever, so I wanted to help you decide if you should maybe run a beta or not, as we like to see a refresh of a feature, update of a design early, or even new apps or changes altogether. However, there's reasons you may want to avoid betas as well. Now, the number one concern I hear about running betas is if it will affect your battery health. I have a bunch of different devices here, all of which have run betas, some affecting it differently than others. The 15 Pro Max, 14 Pro Max, 13 Pro Max, and iPad Pro M2. I've run betas on every single one of them, and I've even asked you how your battery health is going, and we'll take a look at that as well, since battery health in general seems to be very different for a lot of people. So the short answer as to whether or not betas affect battery health is it depends. By itself, no, they don't affect battery health, but yes, they do based on the battery life or bugs maybe within that beta update, as regular battery life could be much worse and could cause you to charge more or even generate more heat. Heat is the number one enemy of your battery, and I've talked about this extensively in other battery health videos I'll link in the description, but basically the hotter it is, probably the worse for your battery, especially in very hot climates where it could reach 100 degrees or more Fahrenheit or just incredibly hot temperatures around the world. So that's going to affect it the most. And sometimes charging habits, however, I've noticed personally that doesn't seem to affect it as much as people think. But based on overall battery life that could be affected by the overall update, generating heat, causing excess heat, or just for it to be needing to be charged over and over more than normal, then yes, it will affect it. All batteries degrade over time, like I said, affected by heat and charge cycles as you charge them over and over, so I thought we'd take a look and I'll show you the different results. This is my iPhone 15 Pro Max, and if we go down to the battery, you can see the battery health here. I have 99% with 155 cycles. If we go back another year, and I'll put coconut battery on the side so you can see, with the 14 Pro Max, we go into settings here, we go to battery health and charging. Keep in mind, this actually ran iOS 15 and iOS 16 betas, and this one is down to 87%, but it has 319 cycles. With the iPhone 13 Pro Max, one of the most or best regarded phones for battery life, you'll see here it is in Sierra Blue. If we go to settings, then we go down to battery health and charging. This one is down to 98% after 236 cycles. So very different results that we have here. When it comes to the iPad, with the iPad Pro, Apple doesn't currently show us battery cycles or battery health on the iPads, but it looks like it could be coming in future updates for future devices. But if I hook it up to Coconut Battery, it has 250 cycles with 89% battery health. So it varies greatly depending on the usability and what you're doing. And the iPhone 13 Pro Max dropped after the longest amount of time, 99% basically after a year of use. So they're all doing pretty well. Apple says the latest phones can go 1,000 cycles before reaching 80% in ideal conditions, and before the iPhone 15 series devices, that would be 500 cycles down to 80%. So will the battery drain more? Possibly, depending on betas, and I would say especially with iOS 17 betas. iOS 16 as well. Before that, they seem to be pretty good and not really affect your battery as much, going back to the 13 Pro Max. So yes, it can affect it if they have poor battery life. The current betas I'm running, which are a little bit later in the year at this point, iOS 17.5 Beta 1, the battery life seems to be okay, and it probably won't affect it as more. But if your main concern is the battery, well, you probably want to avoid the betas, especially the early ones. Later on, of course, you could try that out, but by maybe iOS 18 Beta 4, it might be safe to run, but I cover that weekly. Now, as far as what you said with X or Twitter, let's take a look. And you'll see that I asked here, after over 6 months, my battery health is at 99%. How is yours, and do you use betas or public iOS releases? And I have 303 responses, and if you scroll through this, you'll see with iOS 17 betas, this seems to be more of an issue, where as you scroll through, depending on people using betas or not, many of them using betas have depleted battery capacity, but many don't, such as this person here who uses betas but keeps their phone at 80% max charge. It varies greatly. Some people don't care how they charge. They don't even turn on optimized charging, run betas, and have 100%. You'll see the use case is very different, but what I find affects it most seems to be heat. So we'll scroll down, 100% public releases, 230 cycles, 191 cycles with 100%. And depending on who it is, some people have 100%, some don't. It really depends on how they're using their phone. And many use betas, many don't. Take a look at this if you haven't already. I can link it in the description, and you'll see a 14 Pro Max with 96%. So it varies greatly, but let me know what you think in the comments below and if you run betas yourself. Now, bugs and problems, of course, you'll actually encounter when running iOS betas. And so that's the second most asked thing, if people should run betas and if it will have bugs. Many people message me and say, hey, I'm on iOS 17.2 or 17.3. If I update to the beta, will I get better battery life and will it resolve bugs? In some cases, it will resolve bugs, but many times it doesn't fix any problems or just creates other problems. So typically I say if you have to ask that question, you probably shouldn't run betas in general if you're trying to solve a problem by switching to a beta. However, if you want to test out software, report feedback to Apple in their feedback app, that's the reason to actually test it out. So you can give them feedback and help them make better software, and of course try the new features early for yourself. As far as if betas will damage your phone, people have asked me that as well. While technically it's possible if there's a severe bug, it hasn't really happened yet for the most part, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But in general, if there's a problem where it really heats up the processor, technically it could cause damage, but I haven't seen any personally with any of my phones going back to the early iOS updates, or actually heard from any of you where it physically damaged it, with the exception of maybe one thing, maybe boot loops or a green screen issue some people have had. In some cases, people have upgraded to public versions and said it stopped where they were having a green screen issue. The screen was either green or they had a line down it. Now, in many cases, this was hardware related, but in my research, this seems to be basically a hardware issue, but the risk is far greater for something like this to occur in betas than a public release of iOS. So again, it's a beta issue typically, and that's why you may want to avoid it. Also, many people ask me if warranties will be voided if you're running a beta. Now, Apple covers iPhones regularly, regardless of whether or not they're running beta software. In fact, if you have a problem, you bring it to an Apple store or Apple certified retailer or someone that can service your phone certified by Apple. They'll actually just wipe the phone, put on the public version, and continue to troubleshoot the phone altogether. So yes, they'll cover issues with betas. However, if it's jailbroken or something along those lines, you may not get some coverage, or they may give some pushback and say to put on the public version, then continue troubleshooting. However, if you're going to run some betas, there's a few things you want to know. Know that the point is to find out if there's issues and report them to Apple, as I mentioned earlier, using the feedback app. Also, make sure you have a backup, whether that's on your phone specifically through iCloud or through iTunes on a Windows computer or Finder on the Mac. If you go into settings and you're using iCloud, you can easily just do a backup going into your name at the top. Then you go into iCloud and then go down to backup. If you have iCloud backup turned on, you'll see all of your devices here. However, you will have to have enough storage, and that may cost you a little bit of money to do that. So just keep that in mind. But this is a great way to back up your phone, or you can back it up to your computer if you have one. Also, I would suggest running the public betas, not the developer betas, unless you're a developer. So if you go into your Safari browser or whatever browser you're using, and then you go to beta.apple.com, of course, you have the Apple Beta Software Program. Now, of course, you can always revert back using a computer or just wait for the next public version to release if you are using this so that you can get back on the public updates. But just keep in mind that betas can be a bit risky. Sometimes they'll cause boot loops, but we've even seen that with public releases before as well. So there are inherent risks with it, but if it will damage your phone, not really specifically, but it is something that you may be concerned about. So hopefully that gives you enough information to make a decision as to whether or not you want to run betas and what could happen. But overall, I've been happiest with the iPhone 13 Pro Max back with the iPhone betas when this released, and then throughout its lifespan until I switched to the 14 Pro Max. These were sort of the good days of iPhone where they were less buggy, and now they've become more and more buggy. Hopefully with iOS 18 that changes greatly, but again, early betas typically are very, very buggy. So when iOS 18 Beta 1 releases, typically on the day of WWDC's keynote, and in this case that's going to be June 10th, usually after the keynote, we'll have those betas along with watchOS betas and many others. So the watch betas, the Mac betas, and everything else, then we'll be able to try them out. But the early betas typically are very, very buggy, to the point where I've taken my main phone and ran the regular version of the previous version and then ran the beta on a separate phone, as it was just too buggy to use. So hopefully that's not the case with iOS 18, but again, those are the risks involved with running a beta. Of course, I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.